Members, I'm Polly Ellis, I'm Head of Legal Services. Just a little bit of a brief announcement at the beginning of this meeting. As you'll know, members of this Governance and Audit Committee were appointed by Council at its annual meeting on the 13th of May. Normally at the first meeting after appointments, a Chair and Deputy are appointed. In oversight, these appointments have not been included within the business to be transacted at this meeting, so those appointments will be considered at next committee meeting. For the purposes of this meeting, in accordance with Part 4 of the Constitution, a motion can be moved without notice to appoint a chair for today's meeting. For members to note, in accordance with Part 9 of the Constitution, the person so appointed must be a lay member of this committee. Can I ask if there's a nomination for the chair of this meeting?
Hello. Can I nominate Mrs. Pedginton, please?
Is there a seconder for this nomination? So Catherine Peggington is appointed as chair of today's meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee. So I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for your vote of confidence again. We can carry on with this meeting. Much appreciated. I'd like to welcome everyone to this multi-location hybrid meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee, which is open to the press and public on request. This meeting will not be broadcast live, however, a recording will be made available as soon as possible after the meeting has concluded. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings. I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can members attending via Microsoft Teams refrain from using the chat function and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you may want to speak. May I remind members that as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask that when you all please use your cameras for the duration of this meeting. Please remember to keep your microphone muted when you are not talking. Moving on to the agenda. Agenda item 1, welcome and apologies. Rachel, do we have any apologies, please?
Yes, I've received apologies from Councillor Giles Davis.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Rachel, please can you ask the members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any interest to declare?
If I go through the list, if members can confirm what I've read out is accurate, please. So, Councillor Peter Jones, I believe you have a personal interest as your wife is in receipt of a pension from the Greater Gwent Pension Fund. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Michael Kelleher, I believe you have a personal interest as you are in receipt of a pension from the Greater Gwent Pension Fund. Is that correct? Yep, thank you. Mrs. Peggington, I believe you have a personal interest as your husband is in receipt of a pension from the Greater Gwent Pension Fund. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Mr. Mark Rees, I believe you have a personal interest as you're in receipt of a pension from the Greater Gwent Pension Fund. Is that correct?
For Adarpo, yes, that's correct. A very, very small amount.
Thank you. Councillor Williams, I believe you have personal interest as both yourself and your wife are in receipt of pensions from the Greater Gwent Pension Fund. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3, minutes of Governance and Audit Committee from the 27th of March. Members, please can you state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the minutes? If not, I will take them as agreed. I see no hands raised and no queries, so I'll take them as agreed. Thank you. Moving on to the agenda item 4 is the action sheet. The action sheet has been sent to all members of the committee. Please could you state whether you have anything to raise in relation to the action sheet? If not, can we note its contents?
Chair?
Yes?
Apologies. Okay. Sorry, I was having trouble getting in contact with you. With regard to the minutes, okay, and it's just a nitpicking point, but I wasn't at the last meeting, gave my apologies, but you've noted a declaration of interest from myself, which is my small pension. As I wasn't at the meeting, then technically I couldn't have declared an interest, if you understand where I'm coming from. Thank you. Diolch.
Okay, thank you for raising that, Mr. Rees. We'll correct those minutes. I think you were noted as absent, with apologies. Moving on to the action sheet. I think somebody's going to speak something. Yes?
Yeah, apologies for not including an update within the agenda, but I do have a verbal update I can provide to the committee regards the action within the sheet. The Council is in the process of finalising a new asset management strategy. Within the asset management strategy, a provision will be included for the Council to be able to collaborate to share assets with our public sector partners. One of the key principles of the new asset management strategy will be to promote joint working with public sector and private sector partners and stakeholders where it will benefit service delivery or secure efficiencies. However, in the first instance, we need to prioritise defining the role of the corporate landlord, understanding our own portfolio and our service needs as already identified in the action plan. We should be capable of investigating the potential opportunities within the time span of the new asset management strategy, but exactly when within that 5-year period is still yet to be determined. Ideally, this would be prioritised by regional or national government to deliver the maximum impact. And I've sent that word into Democratic Services for inclusion within the minutes.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or queries for Tom about that update? Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Right, so if there are no questions or queries, can we take them as accepted and note the contents? Thank you. Yes. Moving on to agenda item 5 is the closer collaboration working between Torfaen and Blaenau Gwent councils. I think Mr Vacancy, you're going to present this report, or Tom?
I am. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me today, and good morning to you all. Yes, I provide an update, a verbal update on the closer collaborative working to the Audit and Governance Committee. Just a reminder, actually, that the two councils, Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen, entered into an initial discovery phase in June of 2024. We'd allowed ourselves up to a 9-month period for that discovery phase to complete. We actually completed that in a much shorter period of time. So by December, we were ready to bring a decision into the January's full council meeting with regards to us deciding whether or not to put in front of the members a decision as to whether or not they wish to continue with the arrangements or whether they wish to go their separate ways. And the decision was made in that January meeting for the two councils to continue to work much more closely together. And I'm going to give you a bit of an update really since that moment. Just a quick reminder, if I can, to the committee members as to some of the reasons why we entered into the arrangements together. We'll be very well versed, I'm sure, in respect to the financial picture that's facing local authorities into the medium and long term. It's extremely challenging. Just some context nationally. I mean, the shrinking budgets since 2010, councils' core funding has fallen by almost 10% in real terms. Despite, of course, the rising service demands, councils across England, Wales and Scotland are facing collective funding shortfall of around £8.5 billion by 26-27. Locally, we have medium-term financial plans looking forward between 4 and 5 years across the two councils, where we're seeing pressures in excess of £30 million across the two over that period of time. So really significant pressures nationally, regionally and, of course, locally. The consequences of those pressures are both, I've split them really into two categories. Short term, there is a real impact upon services. So we're having to see, councils are seeing service reductions. We're being forced to cut essential services. That might include increased charges to residents also. Councils are finding themselves in a position where they're having to use reserves or sell assets just to balance budgets. In terms of staffing capacity, we're seeing job losses, reducing capacity, and of course loss of institutional knowledge within councils as we lose key members of our staff. There is increased inequality across our communities. Vulnerable populations are disproportionately affected, of course, by the kind of cuts that we are experiencing. And that, of course, just brings its own additional pressures. And we find ourselves really in a crisis management culture and a shift away from really strategic planning where we should be into much more reactionary work if we're not careful in the short term. In the medium to longer term, we do see a lack of investment in our infrastructure, so we see infrastructure decay. Our economic stagnation, of course, because local government has a role to play in terms of investment in regeneration and economic development within our areas. This in and of itself, collectively, I think, causes a loss of public trust across local government, in spite of the fact that I would still continue to argue that local government remains, in terms of the public sector, one of the most effective ways of delivering at-place services. And the very fact that there are so few councils that have ended up in a bankruptcy position across England and Wales, in fact none in Wales at this moment in time, would suggest that we do a good job overall. It's not to say that there aren't opportunities, as I'll talk about in a second, for efficiency and effectiveness, but I think overall we've got a good track record as a public sector. So that loss of public trust is a concern for us, of course. And of course there is a reduction in resilience across the council, so our forward look becomes more challenging. The impact upon our communities, escalating costs, service overload for the services that we provide, worsening outcomes I've already mentioned, and growing inequalities across our communities, something that we need to be focused on tackling. We find ourselves, of course, in this vicious cycle of demand, I suppose, in terms of unmet need of today becoming more complex needs of tomorrow. And then we find ourselves also in this strategic paralysis, this inability to think beyond the short term if we're not careful. So the decision then for the two local authorities to work more closely together. I will come on to that. The decision for the two local authorities to work more closely together then was seen as being able to offer several benefits, many of which are around tackling those issues that I've just mentioned, driving efficiency, more innovative ways of solving some of those problems, more influence actually locally, regionally and at a national level. So I'll just cover some of those. In terms of cost efficiency, what we're able to start to see is two authorities come together where we are being able to see an increase in opportunity at scale. The two management team structures have come together, which in of itself will have saved us around £300,000 just at that top table within the two local authorities. That's not to say that that's not the final picture, of course, in terms of opportunities to find greater efficiencies, but that's one benefit that we're already seeing realisation of. There is opportunities for us to improve service delivery across our councils. We're already seeing our children's services working much more closely together, our corporate services much more closely together. We've now got, as a result of the piece of work that we're doing across adults and communities and neighbourhoods and environment, as well as our economy and place directorates, we're seeing much more closely working, where we'll be able to start to see some real benefits there. That gives us a real chance to increase our scale, of course, because that's important. One of the challenges that we'll have as two small authorities is that some of the things I've described are very difficult to achieve unless we start to think at scale. This really gives us that opportunity, and it gives us a bigger footprint across our two authorities, but actually combined gives us a bigger footprint and a bigger influence at a Cardiff regional level and nationally too. There is enhanced innovation and knowledge sharing across the two authorities. We've already started to see both staff groups coming together. Local authorities working in isolation from one another don't share information as well as they possibly could. We're now seeing that those opportunities are really being afforded to us. So we've got already restructured ourselves so that we've got 233 of our leadership team coming together across the two councils in July to share ideas, to start to really tackle some of those challenges at what we're calling a future Blaenau Gwent and Torfaen event, and they're events that we'll be holding 4 times a year, every year going forward. It gives us a chance to be stronger strategic planners. We're already starting to explore opportunities as to how the two authorities can work much more closely together in partnership with external partners to look at what we wouldn't offer from an economic development, from a regeneration perspective, for example, from a planning perspective, what we might not offer as individual councils, but we might be able to come together to offer as joined up councils. So there'll be a piece of work that we're working on currently over the course of the summer to explore what those opportunities might look like in terms of that place planning. Increased resilience and flexibility. I've already mentioned the fact that we've started to see more effective ways of working together as a senior leadership team. But the very fact that we can save money at that top table, and quite possibly throughout the organisation in terms of leadership, a real sort of focus on efficiency, means that what we can do is do our best to preserve our frontline services. And I think that in of itself can bring together an increased positive look of the councils and obviously maintain that trust. Importantly for our staff, we're really keen to invest in our staff, and they are our greatest asset. We employ across the two councils around about 14,000 members of staff, I think, is the total. I might be corrected on that, but I think that's roughly what it is. There is clearly an investment in that staff group to make our services better for our customers, for our residents, really matters. So giving our staff fantastic opportunities to develop and better career pathways can really help us in that regard. And I've already mentioned it very briefly, but some greater influence regionally and nationally. And what you'll see, some of this is built upon the work that Torfaen have been doing over time around Marmot, but we've been Marmot's moved to becoming the first Marmot nation, Wales is moved to becoming the first Marmot nation in the world. Torfaen was most certainly at the head of that. And I have to give some credit to Blaenau Gwent in that too, because they have become the second Marmot council in Wales, and they've really adopted those Marmot principles really quickly, much more quickly than I'd anticipated actually. And that in itself is a fantastic story for us across our area. So since we've been in post, since January, there's been a lot of work going on. A lot of this is around aligning our structures, aligning our governance and auditing and risk management processes. But we've now got a 12-week performance schedule that's aligned across the two authorities. So we look at all of the directorates across both authorities on a 12-week cycle, looking at their performance, looking at ways to improve and checking in that we're as effective as we possibly can. We've aligned our budget timelines. That's important for us. Just operationally, our two finance teams have been working much more closely together. That gives us a chance to actually make sure that we're aligning budget timelines, which really helps us just from a leadership perspective, and it helps the two councils get ahead of the game. We're quite early in setting our budgets. We're already working, for example, on next year's financial challenges very early in our cycle, and in fact across the two councils we're not just working on 1 year now, we're thinking much more long term about what we're doing across 3 and 4 years across that medium term. Our democratic calendar has been aligned. It makes sense to do that, or we're working on aligning the calendar. It makes sense to do that in part because there'll be, whilst the sovereignty across the two authorities remains intact, very much so, in respect of the decision that we made to federate and not to merge. That's an important point to make. But of course that doesn't mean to say that we aren't making decisions at the same time. So that's really important in terms of the democratic calendar alignment. We've developed and enhanced, I think, our risk and assurance monitoring processes. And in fact, we're learning a lot from one another. One council was better at one thing, the other at another. And what we've done is adopted the best practice from both councils in respect of that. We've done a piece of work in Torvine over the past 3 years, which we've identified as the characteristics of an outstanding council. Now, the characteristics look at, I suppose, the way that we deliver our business, and we broke that down into 8 areas: an innovative council, aspirational and visionary council, high-performing council, collaborative and inclusive council, a well-managed council, engaging and accessible council, financially astute council, and digital and data-led council. These are measures by which we hold ourselves accountable to in terms of the work that we do. And a fantastic piece of work took place across the 2 authorities, which was an adoption of the characteristics across the 2, and again a real enhancement on what Torvine alone could produce, and together with Blynygrant we produced what I think is a better set of standards for ourselves to be held to account to, and to hold ourselves to account to. We've done a piece of work on our Marmot master planning. I've already mentioned the fact that the 2 councils are now the first 2 councils in Wales to become Marmot councils. Marmot, of course, is there recognising that those health inequalities are socially determined, and the way that we will tackle them is through that proportionate universalism approach to tackling inequality across those 8 Marmot areas. Our 2 councils have both adopted the Marmot plans, and have both developed together a Marmot master plan, a set of outcomes that we're aspiring to in terms of improving inequality across our 2 councils. Regulatory meetings, of course, have aligned similarly, I suppose, to that democratic calendar. We're looking at opportunities across HR. We're doing a lot of work in terms of pay structures, particularly in Blynygrant, more than in Torvine, I must admit, to make sure that, again, our staff are properly remunerated and supported. We've done a piece of work on structural alignment. So in Blynygrant, when I first came to Torvine 3 or 4 years ago now, actually, not long after I reorganised Torvine in a way that I felt was more effective to be able to deliver our services. So we effectively brought children's social care services much more aligned into education, and thought about children, young people and families through a completely different lens. We knew that we had to invest in our communities, so I introduced a Adults and Communities Directorate, and then we've also divided off our neighbourhoods and environment services from our economic development, regeneration and planning services, just I think in terms of splitting what was a overly cumbersome directorate into something that's far more effective and efficient, so we can improve services more rapidly and more effectively. And that's a piece of work that I've introduced into Blynygrant. So I put it in that context because it was always important to me that Blynygrant didn't think that this was a Torvine takeover in terms of these structures. It wasn't actually. It was a piece of work that I've done with the administration here about the best way that we could solve problems in Torvine. And I've done the same piece of work with the administration in Blynygrant to ensure that they can benefit from the same structures. So that structural alignment has happened already, and that's included a lift and shift on May the 1st with regards to Blynygrant's move towards those new structures. As it stands right now, Polly actually is helping us with a review of our constitutions, and this is in respect of a gap analysis, because our constitutions need to be renewed, reviewed and rethought, I suppose, not as a result actually. That's just good practice for us to continue to do that, and there are opportunities for us to do that. But also in the fact that there is some joint space that neither of our constitutions will currently occupy, and we do need to do a piece of work around that. So Polly's leading a piece of work for us around that. There will, of course, be opportunities for member development across both councils, all members, and opportunities for that are being explored more closely as we move into the new piece of work we're doing over the summer. We've been doing some work more closely on member health and safety opportunities. We were really concerned about particularly some of the responses to members on social media, some of the threats and actual incidents that were occurring for members. We'd had some vandalism on members' homes, and threats of vandalism on members' homes across both authorities. That won't be unique to Torvine or to Blaenau Gwent. We've done a piece of work on that to try to ensure that we're as supportive as our members as we possibly can. And again, that gives us a chance to link those two pieces of work. We're now actually in the next stage of discovery because although we've done all of that work is really just the foundation for us to then say, well, where next? What's our destination in 3, 4, 5 years? And what will the future look like for our two councils? And we're just doing a piece of work on that now. I was asked actually just to cover very briefly what does the work that I've described mean for the committee. I think that's really important. Well, Tom and I had quite a lengthy discussion about this actually. I think to a large degree it does, the fact that we remain two politically and financially sovereign organisations mean that for the committee it's business as usual to a large degree, that's fair to say. You'll continue to receive the same reports, but we'd ask that you take assurance that officers are working more closely on the matters of governance so that we can improve the way that we do our business. I think in terms of scrutiny more broadly, we do need to consider things you'll need to consider, as I would ask scrutiny groups to consider our work through a federated lens, I suppose, is the best way to think about it. So I think that means that we'll be legitimately challenged, actually, how effective we are being in that arrangement. I think that's an absolutely perfectly legitimate thing for us to be asking questions about, in terms of that closer working, in terms of realising some of those benefits that I've just described, and checking how well things are going for our staff and for our, for our residents across the board. I think that's perfectly legitimate to look at that and say, well, are we realising the benefits that can come as a result of this more effective and efficient way of working? I think it may well be worth me offering an update to the committee annually. I think this is a good opportunity. I would suggest that the work in some of this space, it's not always as fast moving as certainly as I would like it to be. I find some of that work a little bit frustrating at times, but nevertheless, we do have to go through our proper processes. But I do think it's worth us bringing updates to you, and I would suggest it's annually or possibly more often if we feel there is something specific that you'd like to look at. I think from an assurance, risk and performance perspective, I think you'll be pleased, and I hope you'll be pleased, and it may be something that you've got further interest in terms of that new way of working, the corporate way of working across our programmes of work. In terms of opportunities for joint committees, Tom and Polly may have more insight into this, to the specifics of it. There may be opportunities for scrutiny committees to work much more closely together. I don't know what it means for Audit and Governance Committee necessarily, but you will be looking at the same challenges across both councils, so there may be something that we can do that starts to mean that there's opportunities for two groups to come together. That could be for development purposes. It could be to improve the scrutiny across the two councils, across the federated approach. I would emphasise, though, that whatever happens, that we would have to continue to have independence in respect of our governance processes there. We're sovereign authorities, and we need to retain and preserve that in any new processes that we introduce. But I think that's a piece of work that we can probably explore. And with your permission, Chair, I'll ask Tom and Polly to perhaps reflect on that if they've got anything to add, just as I finish here. I think also then, but one thing we can certainly do, and I'll just finalise here, really, I suppose, is there may be opportunities for training across the two councils in terms of governance and audits. Again, things to learn. We've done that across lots of other areas, and it's really been beneficial to us. I think just that shared diversity in views and the way that we operate. I think what we can do is come together and say, take the best of what we've got in each place. And I think that's a good idea for us to do that. And I'd encourage you to do that where we possibly can. And I'm sure as officers, we will be able to help to facilitate that. So I think that's certainly an opportunity that we could look at. And with that, at the end there, Chair, I don't know if you will give me the latitude to consider Tom and Polly reflect on that one point. The rest of it is there for you to consider.
Thank you very much for that thorough update. That was great. Any questions or queries for Mr Vickers while we have you? Councillor Jones, your hand is raised.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, for that very comprehensive report. I'm just wondering, in terms of across the two counties, in terms of frontline delivery service, are there any pinch points that you're identifying? I mean, one thing that jumps into my head straight away is waste collection. We've got different regimes, 2 weekly collections in Torvine, 3 weekly in Blaenau Gwent. Now, looking forward in terms of efficiencies, fleet management, etc., are those sort of issues going to cause us difficulties?
Yeah, it's a great question, Councillor Jones. Thank you for that. The answer is yes, there are definitely pinch points, but that's not to say that there aren't opportunities, even where those pinch points exist. And you've actually just identified the pinch point and one of the opportunities within it in the very question that you asked. So if we just focus on waste for the time being. So there are very different regimes, very different policies, very different approaches in terms of waste. Just as an example, Blaenau Gwent has got 3 weekly residual collections. Torvine remains with 2. There are different operational practices in place. So I don't foresee that changing. I don't think that's not for each council to decide for one another. If at some point the two councils change their policies, we can adapt the practice, and there may be opportunities that are afforded us, but at this moment in time, to bring those two services together operationally would be practically impossible. However, as you've already pointed out there is opportunity, of course, to share fleet. Our fleet costs us a fortune, it's fair to say, and quite often we've got fleet that we'll need as individual councils in order to serve our communities effectively. But that fleet won't always be in use every day. And there may well be ways that we can look at that and start to think about, well, can we share fleet across the two councils, meaning that we can halve the lease arrangements or halve the cost of purchasing. In some circumstances, that won't be true in all circumstances, but it's certainly one thing that we'll be looking at. I think it's also, within the structures that we've got, what you will see is, whilst I think legitimately, and this is represented in the structures actually, adults and communities, there are clearly opportunities for shared leadership, and that's in place. We've got the same thing in place across neighbourhoods and our environment services from a leadership team perspective, not necessarily saying these services are working more closely together yet, but we'll explore what those opportunities look like. And we've also got the economy in place directorates under single leadership. What we have decided to not do at this moment in time is to bring our two corporate services closer together, so we retain independence from that perspective. So we've got obviously Andrew as the director of in Torvine, and Rhiann the director, Andrew's equivalent in Blaenau Gwent. We've also made a decision because our children, families and younger people services, education, social care in particular, in both councils have certain vulnerabilities. Some of those vulnerabilities we can make improvements on internally. Some of those are vulnerabilities we're exposed to as a result of the markets, for example, the commission markets. Both councils have seen a higher number of higher cost packages in social care, for example, particularly for those people in looked after residential care. So because of those vulnerabilities, I also decided to not bring shared leadership across those two authorities because I felt that they needed to be preserved and intact at place. But I would emphasise all of that I've just said doesn't mean to say that where services are separate, we don't think there are opportunities for greater efficiency and effectiveness within those areas. And I'd rather not identify particular areas. You'll understand why, because I don't want to suggest that decisions have already been made. And also, I would say, just because services are now under a shared leadership capacity, doesn't mean to say that automatically all of those services would naturally come together. I just think it opens up opportunities, and that's all part of the next stage of discovery. So I hope that's a comprehensive response to your question, Councillor Jones.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones. Mr. Kelleher, your hand's raised.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And like Councillor Jones, I'd like to thank Stephen for the comprehensive report. You emphasise on several occasions a concept called Marmot Council, which I am unfamiliar with, and you'll have to forgive me because of my hearing loss. I do rely on captions on these collaborative platforms, and I have to say Teams spelt Marmot Council differently every single time. So because I lost the word and I lost the spelling. Is there something that you could, is there a short document or summary you could share with us offline perhaps to give us some more clarification about the concept of the council, the Marmot Council issue?
I can certainly do that. I mean, just so people are aware, the Marmot name comes from Professor Sir Michael Marmot, who was the original author of the Marmot Report, which looked at health inequalities across the UK. And it was effectively the report concluded that well-being is not just about individual choice or biology. It is socially determined, and of course for councils, those social determinants are where we can best support our communities. But that is what, when we describe ourselves as a Marmot Council, we're effectively saying that we subscribe to those principles, which are absolutely correct, and that Marmot also has described. Initially, there were 6 principles. There are now 8 principal areas in which Marmot says that if you focus proportionately, but universally, on those 8 areas, then you will be able to take steps towards tackling inequality. And I think we've got an absolutely exceptional plan in place that we're developing across the 2 councils. And I'll very briefly just say, every child will get a great start in life. Enable children, residents, I'm reading this now, so young people and adults to maximise capabilities and have their control over their lives, create fair employment and good work for all, ensure healthy standard of living for all, create and develop healthy and sustainable places and communities, strengthen the role and impact of ill health prevention, tackle racism, discrimination and their outcomes, and pursue environmental sustainability and health and equity together. It's not just the council's responsibility to do that, of course. We want to work with our partners in that, but we do see ourselves as the frontline defence to the public sector in our position in here, and we also feel that we've got a role to lead our partners into this space, and that's really, I think, where the 2 councils are really going to step into their own. What I will be able to, I'll ask Tom to share with you a document to the committee that will sort of at least set out what Marmot is about and some of those principles, and of course we will be having our master plan is being built around those Marmot principles, and we'll have more to talk about as that master plan is developed in the coming months.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. Rees, your hand is raised. You have a question?
Diolch yn fawr, Stephen, for that. Excellent, brilliant. That's exactly the sort of thing that we were looking for. I really appreciated your commentary on the report, so that it fleshed it out a little bit more. forgive me, I've got a number of comments to make. My mind is whirring on all of this, and there may be things that come into my head later, and I'd appreciate if it was okay that if I did have a question to put to you after the meeting, if something comes into my head, that you know, that's okay to do that. I think what I'm particularly looking for is initially this issue of savings and efficiencies. And thank you for putting a figure on what you think that the savings are for the senior management team, 300,000, I think you mentioned. So first off, is that a one-off, or will that be a continuing saving or efficiency? And I think that what we as a committee might be interested in is as this develops, if you can put you know, figures on savings and efficiencies, I think that would be much appreciated. In terms of you coming to the future committee meetings to update us, I mean, I think that it would be useful in this sort of early stage of the process that perhaps every 6 months you or one of the senior team would be able to come and update us. And in terms of the timeline of where we are going now, I wonder, it was quite clear from the discovery report, you had a set amount of time. I'm wondering now what the timescale is for the next stages of the process. And just one last thing, I think it would be very, very useful if we as a committee at some point met with our colleagues in Blaenau Gwent. You highlighted, Stephen, about how yourselves as officers are learning from each other. Well, that's an opportunity where we could be learning from each other. It could be that they do things better than we do, and vice versa. So I think that would be something useful to look at. And you're quite right that we as a committee need to you know, audit, scrutinise how this is all working as the years go ahead. But I'm wondering whether there's scope for, when we get reports, that is there some way that it can be highlighted in those reports how the closer collaboration between Blaenau Gwent and vice versa is delivering on savings and efficiencies. So anyway, thank you very much again, Stephen, for that. And I really hope that this carries on and works now. Thank you. Diolch.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I can answer the first question. The £300,000 that I mentioned is a recurrent saving. So yes, you save it in the current year, but then of course you save it every year because you don't replace it. So that's good. That brings us a better financial position. It's not to say that you can achieve that at every level within the organisation. It's just that, as I mentioned, when we bring directorates together in the way that I have, and in fact when you bring a chief executive together, so although my salary across the two authorities, because of the way that chief exec salaries work in Wales, effectively it is determined largely by scale and not by scope, salaries are, and the workforce salaries are then benchmarked against the chief executive's salary. There are, just the very fact that the two councils share a chief exec means that the councils collectively save on money, even if the pay goes up a little, it means that it's still, you're only paying half of the amount each. So just on that role alone, for example, including on cost, there was a £100,000 saving across the two councils. So that was a clear benefit. The future meetings, I'm more than happy to be invited as often as you feel is appropriate. I'm absolutely at your service there. I think in terms of the time frame, I think in my mind I've got a 3 to 4 year plan, I have to say. There is a long-term development piece across looking at the two councils in terms of opportunities across spans and layers, bringing the services much more closely together in the way that we've described, exploring opportunities to develop ourselves as two councils, make ourselves more investable as two councils. These are not, these are large strategic pieces of work that realistically you can set in train during this administration, and one would hope into future administrations that they would be, you know, evolving those plans too. But in my mind, it's a sort of a 3 or 4 year plan at the moment. And I mentioned the meetings with the Blaenau Gwent group, as you've suggested. All the reasons that all the things you said, I agree with completely. I'm taking a similar report actually, and this was about aligning our governance processes. As a result of me being asked to come to this committee, I've also made a suggestion to Blaenau Gwent's committee that I go there. I'm going there in July with a similar report. So all I would ask is that the decision to bring the two councils committees together for that training and development would be after that meeting, so that they can at least have heard what you've heard. And I'm mindful that, Tom, did you you were going to say something about the opportunities in that space? Is that?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Just going back to Stephen's original points about joint meetings. As far as open scrutiny is concerned, there's a long-standing legislative not requirements, but it's in legislation that scrutiny committees can meet across boundaries and form a joint committee across boundaries. As far as Governance and Audit Committee is concerned, I'm not aware of any legislation in that space that would compel authorities to come together and do a joint meeting. Now, that's not to say it's not impossible, but it would just require some work to understand the legalities of it and whether you know, whether it is acceptable. And I suppose before that, there needs to be a piece of work exactly. You know, why are we coming together? You know, is there actually any need to come together and have a formal joint committee at this stage? You know, that hasn't been set out, I suppose. I agree that coming together informally, whether it's for a training session on the same topic, or whether it is to network and learn from each other, great. I can definitely see the benefits in that. It's just, you know, if we were to actually have a formal committee, then, you know, what would be the purpose? Even before myself and probably Polly would have to work out if it's actually allowable. Okay.
So, Williams, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's very helpful, and obviously what you've outlined essentially is the changing operational needs and the way the organisation works, which I think is important in terms of the backdrop for this as a committee. I'm assured that obviously we continue to be a separate Torfaen and Blaenau Gwent Audit and Governance Committee because we are separate political and financial entities. I would suggest that where perhaps some of the focus may be in relation to joint working, maybe where there are those external audit reports that will have a bearing on both councils, where it may make sense for us to look at how we respond. That's just a suggestion. I think the other thing that would help inform that is clarity for this committee as to those service areas that remain distinct, and you've outlined some of that, like, for example, the corporate services, and those that have been combined, like I think you said economy and environment. So therefore, I think that will help determine whether some of those external reports are appropriate for both potentially together and those that are separate. So I'm just giving you a couple of suggestions there. The other thing is then there's potential to look at what learning there may be around training and support that's come from where there already are combined scrutiny processes for the CJC and the PSB as two examples. And I think we just need to be wary that when you have a collective oversight and audit of a larger entity, that things don't get missed. So that, for example, SRS is on your audit plan, I think, Peter, but there's a risk because it provides a service to 5 different bodies that who picks up the actions and things like that. I've seen that kind of thing before. So they're comments rather than any kind of criticism. It's just sort of things that I think could be considered going forward. And I would suggest that in our forward audit plans, we include those things that we're going to try to consider looking at jointly. That's all. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Keith, do you have a question?
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me? Oh. Well, firstly, thank you, Stephen, for that detailed report. What I'd like to ask about is something that's a bit of a thing to me, and that is, if you think training is expensive, try ignorance. And I'm a great believer in training. So what I'd like to know, firstly, is what sort of budget do we have for training our staff? I'm actually a bit of a mantra in business, right? You know, not quite the same here. And that is, I can always find new customers, and I can always find new people to deliver those services. So I would very much, it's all about our staff first. And if you've got the right staff in place and you've got them trained, then you can deliver the service that you need to do. So the question I really want to ask is, what's the budget for our training for tour farming? What does that work out per member of staff? And where can I find the training prospectus so I can see what courses are available to our staff, what the take-up is, and are they taking advantage of the budget? Is that budget being increased or decreased? And that's about it, really. Right.
Yeah, so it's a complicated landscape, as you can imagine, across an authority. Local authorities offer probably amongst any organisation, I'd challenge anybody to find an organisation that offers a more diverse range of services across a more diverse population of customer, resident, because of course we offer services from cradle to grave across our council for every single person who lives in the borough, every single house, every single road, every single business. You know, we have an impact, we have an influence over all of that. So it's quite complicated. Not only that, so I'll just use social care as an example. Training for social care is and many of our training, the training that's available is delivered either through national grant money, which comes in, or it's delivered at regional level. So it's not as straightforward as me simply saying this is how much the council has. The picture is quite a complicated one. I do absolutely agree with you, Councillor, in terms of the investment in our staff is absolutely our priority. More than happy to talk to you about that. So I would suggest the answer could probably be, the question could probably best be answered in 2 ways. We have a workforce strategy that includes our development, and we can look at all the nuances as to how we support our staff in terms of that development. And I think that's something about the infrastructure and including the investment that we make in it, in the way that you're asking. And we might be able to satisfy or give some answer to that by bringing in perhaps Tina Hume from HR to talk about, if this is, I'm not suggesting that's on your agenda, but it might be something that you want to consider more broadly in terms of us being able to answer those questions. Tina leads that piece of work for us, and we'll have a thorough picture as to what goes across the organisation. But there's a second side to it, and that is around culture and practice, because all the you can train people all you like, but it's all ultimately it's about what they take from that training, how it changes what they do, their behaviour. And again, I'm more than happy. I've got a huge programme of work in place. People will have often hear me talking about rebel culture. Rebel Torvine, Rebel Blaenau Gwent, Rebel BGT. This is this is my own sort of influence, I suppose, in all fairness, on the organisation. I'm really keen that we look at problems through the lens of diversity. I think it's a mistake to think that only the people that sit around the executive board table have the answers for an organisation or organisations as complicated as ours. I absolutely know for a fact that I work with some of the brightest people on that board, but collectively we don't have all the answers. It's really simple. In fact, a lot of the answers come from within our communities themselves, our members, the community leadership approach that we take. So I think there is just something about the way that we organise ourselves and we develop ourselves culturally in order to ensure that we're capturing those diverse perspectives to understand the problem and understand how we solve the problems together. So that's a piece of work that I'm working on a lot. It's something I spend a lot of time focusing upon, and I'm certainly more than happy to come and give you an explanation as to what that work looks like. And just, I mentioned earlier about the 233 members of staff coming together across the future BGT groups. That's an example as to how I've reorganised ourselves to ensure that that group will be looking at the same problems that we would look at as an executive board. So my executive board has become much more about audit and governance in some ways across the organisation. It focuses on the delivery of our programmes, our management of our budgets, management of our performance, how we organise ourselves to deliver the services. But the decision making and the empowerment of our staff that sit at other levels within the organisation is absolutely critical, and that's an example of it. More than happy to come and talk to you about that at any length in greater detail. It's a place that excites me, quite honestly. I totally agree with what you've said though in terms of the investment in our staff.
I'll be alongside that. I have been a trainer. I have worked in Wolfston for Royal Mail for the training team there. So. And one of the great things about working for a public body like Royal Mail is that you had a fantastic array of different courses. And I know that in terms of staff, in terms of allocating the right courses to the right staff, can be very motivating for them as well, because if you invest in time and energy into staff, then they feel as though they're being valued. And I very much like the point, I'm a great believer that use every brain, right, rather than just one or two brains, because invariably you will get it wrong. So I would like, at some point, because it is something that's very passionate to me in terms of training, is to really understand exactly what ring fence have we made in terms of budget for our training, because the more efficient we make our staff, right, as I said, it's a benefit. Like I said before, if you think training is expensive, try ignorance. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of ignorance, and training is a great way. So yeah, I'd love to take that, and perhaps you can give me a budget figure and what's being ring fenced by Torvine for training. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Just a final point. I would just like to support the comments made by my colleague in terms of actually getting some of the baseline information, so we can look at about improvements in terms of efficiency. I forgot to mention that when I spoke before. And finally, which may, I think, help the committee as well, is perhaps just, obviously no names, but an organisation chart so we know which service areas have been brought together and which are still separate, because I think that will help us to understand how the evolution is taking place. And that pictorially is simple and clear. So yeah, and I know it's been available in Torvine. So.
Yeah, it's available across. Yeah, absolutely. It's available across both organisations. It's a relatively straightforward. Just to answer your question earlier, I've not. Interestingly, my point around the restructuring, in advance of the restructure, education services was completely separate from isolated. Children's services was children's and adult social care services were joined. That they were the two of the large directorates. We had no focused area on communities, and we had and our neighbourhood services effectively did everything: neighbourhoods, environment, economy, place. It did all of those front-facing services, the ones that members are obviously very often interested in, waste and highways and the likes of. So the way I try to look at this is where do I think, from my experience and from the conversations I have with people, which areas are natural bedfellows, and as a result of that, that's the way that I've restructured. So it makes more sense to me that we bring children and families services together, so education and children's social care much more closely together, because they are the people that have influence over children, families and younger people. We needed a communities directorate, so we separate off adults from social care, from children's social care, because even though we often refer to them as social care, they're not natural bedfellows at all. They do very little together and understand very little about one another's world, and don't really need to in many ways, in many day-to-day operational senses. And so for us to remove adult social care into a communities directorate makes much more sense, because we know if we're going to tackle inequalities, for example, we know that's where we can have the most influence over our adult population at one end of the scale, from those that are completely independent to those that need our support from high quality social care services. And the dividing up of the final part of our structures was effectively to recognise that a single communities directorate, neighbourhood and communities directorate, is simply too big for any one person to manage. It's a huge task, disproportionately, I think, I suppose, disproportionate to the rest of the council if you're not careful, in terms of the way that that's managed and the focus upon it. So the idea that we bring economy in place, which is really economy, planning and regeneration together, I think they're natural bedfellows, and then we have neighbourhoods and environment as the other side. It's simply a dividing of that directorate, and that's what we've done. That I'll be able to show you as a single structure, and that's as simple as the structure really is, but I'll be able to get that to you. We'll send that over to you today.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you for that in-depth explanation, and I think it's brought us all up to speed with this collaboration. It sounds really exciting. Can I just ask, in your table that you presented to the council, you had actions for the first 6 months. Are you happy with the way that the first 6 months are going ahead?
I'm more than happy if you wish for me to come as often as you want. I'm more than happy to come back in 6 months' time, absolutely. And as often as you want me to, really. All I would ask is just to understand that some of these things don't turn around in 3 months, as you'll imagine. But I imagine in 6 months we'll have a story to tell.
Okay, that would be lovely. Thank you
and I
very
think
much.
really useful context, actually, for the rest of the work that the committee do. So it's a good idea, I think.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your report. Thank you. See you in 6 months-ish. Thank you. Right then. Recommendations were just that we accept that report and accept the update. I think everybody's happy with that. Can we move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 6, Audit Wales Work Programme, 4th quarter. Charlotte Owen, are you with us? Yes. Can you present the report, please? Thank you for
thank you, Chair.
me through that report.
And thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think you're probably all familiar with this. It's our quarterly Audit Wales Work Programme update. I don't plan on going through it in any detail, but I am conscious that this is dated 31st of March, so it's the position at the end of quarter 4 of last year. So I just want to draw to your attention a few areas where things have moved on slightly. So in terms of our thematic review on the Council's commissioning arrangements, that report has now been issued as final, so I'd imagine that'll probably be coming to the next committee meeting. And the local project on leisure services had a meeting with Council this week, actually, in terms of setting that up, so that will be going ahead over the summer, probably August, September time. And the other one to update you on is the national study on temporary accommodation. So that report is going to be published next month. So again, that one should be with you before too long. And I think everything else is pretty much as it is in the report here. But yeah, very happy to answer any questions if anyone has any on any of the work we've got going on at the moment.
Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions with regards to this report, please? No. Mr. Rees, I see your hand is raised.
Diolch, Chair, and diolch, Charlotte, for the report. And thank you. That it's useful to have in there the links to other specific reports that we can learn from. I'm just going to. It's a general question which I accept you may not be able to answer, but if you could take it back to your colleagues. We as a Governance and Audit Committee now have to deal with something that's called global internal audit standards, and you know that's being now accepted by all accountant auditing sort of bodies across the piece. In your work as auditors, when you go to visit all of the 22 different authorities, are you asking them, have you signed up to the global internal audit standards? Thank you.
I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. Certainly in terms of performance audits, that's not something that we generally go along and ask. It may be something that financial audit do. I'd have to check with them and let you know if that's okay. But no, as performance audit, we don't. I think if we were doing a specific piece of work on internal audit, it might be something that we would explore, but that's not something that we've looked at recently. But I will check with my financial audit colleagues and get back to you if that's okay.
Thank you, Charlotte. I think Peter can perhaps throw some light on this.
Yeah, I don't think they're particularly optional, the global internal audit standards, the mandatory standards that we'd expect it to comply with. I'm sure I've bored you all to death at length on those in the past, but every 5 years they are externally assessed by an external body. So at any point in time, bodies don't have to be audited annually on them, but over a period, within a period of 5 years, they have to be audited once or checked once. So I think it is mandatory, and that review that happens externally will say how compliant the body, the internal audit section itself is with those standards. It's all about the performance of the internal audit section, not wider than that, to be honest with you. So it is very much a financial discipline. But it is mandatory, and in 3.5 years' time, we'll have another external inspection on internal audit and all.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams, your question?
Not so much a question, it was really just an observation. I was interviewed in a different capacity under the capital planning and local government audits. I just thought I should declare that because it wasn't in my capacity as a member of this committee.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rees, you happy with that explanation?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And where I'm coming from is because I'm involved in other committees, and this is coming up, and I'm just wanting to make sure that everything is all done as it should be. Diolch. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've got the reassurance that we're complying. Okay, thank you. Anybody else got any questions or queries with this report? Okay, then we'll accept it as read. Unaccepted. Thank you. Thank you very much, Charlotte. Moving on to agenda item 7 is the update of external regulatory reports. Tom Roberts, I think, is going to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. This is your usual report setting out details of new external audit work received by the Council. As the committee is aware, Torfaen Council has a protocol for dealing with new external audit reports, which has been agreed by this committee. In brief, that requires all new reports to be received by the Governance and Audit Committee, referred to the relevant Scrutiny Committee, or maintained under the oversight of this committee and added to the Council's single Governance and Improvement Action Plan. This is monitored by this committee every 6 months. The report isn't for the committee to undertake detailed scrutiny of the recommendations, rather it is to assure itself that the recommendations being received are being properly considered and actioned. That said, if there are any questions about the specifics of each report, I will either try and answer or get you information you need outside of the meeting. As you can see, there have been 2 new reports received by the Council since the last update in March 25. There's 1 local report, that's a CIW report on Foster Wales Torfaen, and 1 regional report, a regional Audit Wales report on unscheduled care called Urgent and Emergency Care Flow Out of Hospital. As far as the individual reports are concerned, Foster Wales Torfaen, overall CIW's findings indicate children experience consistent and stable care with foster carers in Torfaen who are committed to supporting them to achieve good well-being outcomes. They develop positive relationships with their foster carers and are supported to remain within their family or extended networks wherever possible. Children are engaged in education activities and are supported to lead happy, healthy and active lifestyles and maintain relationships with people significant in their lives. The report notes a single area of improvement identified as part of the inspection process that the Council will need to respond to, and that is safer care arrangements need to consider risk and or potential risks and provide guidance to foster carers on how to manage and or mitigate risks to keep children safe. Our response to the area for improvement will be monitored by the Council's Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The second report, the Regional Unscheduled Care Review. The Regional Unscheduled Care Review, as you would expect, is not primarily focused on the local authority. The majority of the recommendations are therefore targeted at health. However, 4 of the 14 recommendations made require a response from the local authority. Overall, Audit Wales found that despite a clear focus on improving patient flow within the region, a significant number of medically fit patients are occupying hospital beds. This continues to have serious knock-on effects on the NHS pathways of care and creates risks of patients' physical and mental well-being. More timely assessments of patients, a less risk-averse approach to discharge planning and more consistent application of discharge policy is needed. Workforce and IT system challenges continue to be key barriers that partners will need to focus on to secure value from the investments made and to achieve improvements. So the 4 recommendations that require a response from the local authority, they relate to improving training and guidance on discharge planning, that's recommendation 1. Recommendation 3, embedding a 7-day approach to discharge. Recommendation 8, improving the quality and sharing of information. And then recommendation 11 is patient, service user and staff feedback. A regional response has been developed in response to this report, and the relevant recommendations where the local authority has responsibility are included in Appendix 3. The report and its recommendations will refer to the Adults and Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee for future monitoring. Just to repeat, I'd like to remind members that officers with responsibility for addressing recommendations receive reports and are required to ensure the Council responds appropriately. These reports have already been received and discussed by the Council's leadership team. The process will continue to be monitored through the reports received by this committee and the Council's scrutiny committees, as well as the Council's executive team. I'll leave it there and I'll be happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions with regards to these reports, please? Councillor Williams?
Yeah, I think it's helpful that as a committee we know where they're going to be picked up, which is always helpful. And I would venture to suggest that in terms of at least a couple of those local authority actions, the Gwent region is probably in a stronger position than some, given the working with the Regional Partnership Board and engagement with Citizen and Carers Panel.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or queries? I had a question. It was a technical question. With regards to the foster carers, it says there's 96 mainstream foster carers and 62 connected person fosterers. What is the difference?
Sorry, I'm going to have to get the technical advice from the directorate. So I'll speak to the head of service and I'll come back to the committee.
Okay, just out of interest, what the difference was. Okay, lovely, thank you. Anybody else got any questions with regards to these reports? No? Okay then. Recommendations are on page 68.
Sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Rees.
Sorry, Chair. You may not be able to answer this, Tom, but on the the report looking at delays to medically fit individuals being discharged from hospital to wherever is best for them to go, whether it's back to home or to into some care facility. I was really interested to see the statistics that where the bottleneck seems to be is delays in the actual assessment of what might be required for those individuals. So I accept what you're saying, that the services involved are now addressing those issues, but I'm wondering about a timescale on it, and when that might be reported back to us, that fingers crossed that improvements have been made in those assessments. I accept that you might have to go and ask someone about that, but that's a comment from myself. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose there's two parts to that question. You are correct. I don't really have the depth of knowledge to answer that question. But at the same time, as I've said, the action plan will be monitored by the relevant Oversight Scrutiny Committee. That's the Adults Communities Oversight Scrutiny Committee, and they will be across that detail. Like I said, this report is really for just to note that the report's been received and the relevant actions are going to take place. I will obviously take your question back to the Directorate and hopefully get you a bit more information as far as the length of time before improvements can be expected.
You okay with that, Mr. Rees? Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams.
It was really just to check with you, Tom. I know obviously there's an annual scrutiny report that covers the work of the scrutiny committees. Does that come to this committee? Because obviously that may help answer some of the points that's made.
Yeah, so just to be clear, each June, July, prior to scrutiny visioning sessions, each committee receives an update on all the regulatory activity that is relevant to that committee, the recommendations that have been made and the progress that's been made against each of those recommendations. I wouldn't expect there to be any detail for this report going to next month's committee, because it's come in so late in the year as it is. But just again to speak in more general terms, when the committee decides that they're comfortable that recommendations have been dealt with, that then is fed back into this committee. I mean, we don't bring all the paperwork into this committee, but the committee is notified, and that would be in our September meeting. That would take place.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks, Tom. If there are no other questions or queries, then we'll take the recommendations on page 68 that we accept them unless I see anyone abstaining. All fine? Okay, lovely, thank you. Thank you for that. Moving on to agenda item 8, the Treasury Management Activities for 24-25. Sharon Coles, would you like to present the report for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to take you through the Treasury activities in Outturn for 24-25. Basically, it's a summary of what is included in the Statement of Accounts, which was published subject to audit on the 28th of May. For 24-25, there is a change to the reporting standard related to leasing, whereby all councils' lease vehicles and properties need to be brought onto the balance sheet as a right-of-use asset. And so we have now lost the option of simply expensing lease rentals to revenue as they are paid. I will add, though, this is an accounting adjustment only, as the hit to revenue is exactly the same but shown in a different way. You will note from paragraph 4.1 that our borrowing at year-end has risen by nearly 20 million, but this was only at that point in time and not reflective of the level of loan balances throughout the year. The increase is shown on the temporary borrowing line, and so was very short in nature and quickly repaid to avoid the cost of carrying these loans. We are, however, under-borrowed if we look at our long-term loans compared with our CFR, which is our capital financing requirement. This represents our underlying need to borrow, measured in line with the Council's asset values and future capital programme. The borrowing strategy we followed for the last financial year was to wait in line with future projections for interest rates until a time when it was considered rates had bottomed out and we could secure relatively cheap money over the periods required to ensure a smooth maturity profile. However, you will see from the graph in 4.1.3 we are yet to achieve this, but we are currently weighing up our options for future borrowing. The reason the graph is so front-loaded is that rates never moved to where we expected, as the financial markets remain very volatile, mainly due to the appointment of the US President and the policies he was introducing. So we are now looking to address this, and we are currently in conversations with our brokers and Treasury Management consultants. You will note that the interest paid on loans has fallen year on year, and so has the average interest rate, so we are managing the situation well. On the investment side, we are basically at a level we expected at year-end, forecasting 15 million and retaining 14 million in investment balances. We continue to be very cautious with our investments and follow strict investment guidelines, which are approved annually as part of the budget setting process. We continue to perform well against the industry benchmark, earning 5.70% compared with the SONIA rate of 4.89%, which is the Sterling Overnight Index average. Paragraph 4.4 gives a high-level view of the capital programme and the areas of capital spend and slippage carried forward into successive periods. I don't really want to go into the report in any greater detail. It's a lovely area to work in, but it's really technical and very dry. So I would, however, like to add that we are required to produce potential indicators against which we are measured, and there's been no breaches during the year, but we are required to update you and as if breaches do occur. So I'd just like to thank you all for listening, and I'll take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for that. Have we got any questions with regard to this financial report? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for presenting it. And I suppose my only query was, because I was quite interested to see at 4.23 that the Council had some investments with other local authorities, Blackpool Council and Eastleigh Borough Council. So I wondered if this was a common occurrence and how those come about.
Good answer. We actually deal with brokers and they put us in touch with other local authorities, so they will then let us know what the rates are and the available monies in the market at any point in time. We also have a legal requirement to keep 10 million in investment balances so we can retain professional investment status under MiFID II. So we decided that if we locked in £10 million with other local authorities for a longer period of time, we could secure higher rates of interest. And that's where those other local authority investments came about.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions with regard to these reports? No, I see no hands raised. No, if we're all happy then, can we move on to the recommendations which are on page 154? That we accept these reports, otherwise we don't accept them as agreed unless I see any hands raised. We're all happy. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 9, the annual Head of Internal Audit Report 24-25, Mr. Williams. Please can you present your report for us?
Thank you, Chair. This is, as the Chair said, my annual report, which is a culmination of the quarterly reports you receive throughout the year in terms of progress against our agreed plan. The purpose is to summarise the work being given, and I have to give an annual opinion on our systems of internal control. The opinion is shown in paragraph 4.1 on page 156. I'm pleased to report that it's improved from the previous year. As you know, I can give what I deem to be 3 types of opinion: sound, reliable or unreliable. We've never been in the unreliable category. For the last 10 years plus, we've been in sound. Last year, we dipped down to reliable because there was a sort of decrease in controls in place, primarily around the HR system. Glad to report they were quickly improved upon. I draw that opinion from all the work we do during the year, and that's probably some 80, 90 pieces of work, but primarily around what I call the core financial systems, the main financial systems of the authority, where all the expenditure and income go through. They're listed in Appendix A, and there's a table on paragraph 4.4 which gives the opinions of those systems. And you can see for 24-25, 7 opinions are full, 5 are substantial, which is an improvement from 4 in the previous year. So that added to the reason why the opinion's gone up to sound. Obviously, being an auditor, a bit pessimistic, there's still scope for improvement, as there is, because there's still some recommendations to be done. There are no high priorities identified within any of those main financial accounting systems, which are shown on page 163 as an appendix. Going through the report then, some other summaries. Obviously, paragraph 4.5 outlines the amount of work we did in the year, which we did 72 systems audits and 27 follow-up audits. The follow-up audits, obviously, after we've done a system audit, we follow up, usually after a period of 6 months, 6 to 9 months, to make sure recommendations are being adequately addressed. I'm pleased to show that they are. Paragraph 4.7 is another table then which gives a summary of all the opinions in the year. And as you can see, of the 99 pieces of work altogether, 74 of them had a full or a substantive opinion, which again, this is all the evidence I use to back up my annual opinion. Paragraph 4.8 onwards identifies where we've identified some high priority recommendations in the work during the year. Pleased to report that these have been addressed as we follow them up. One of the high priorities related to business continuity management, and the civil contingencies team are preparing a plan of suitable exercises to be carried out. It can be a theoretical area, business continuity management, in the event of disaster, how do we deal with it? And I suppose a good example of how we dealt with it in recent years is probably the COVID pandemic, where we kept services going, etc., in the community. But in terms of what they recommend in terms of continuity management, you carry out sort of annual exercises or biannual exercises to create different scenarios, so you find out how good your plans are in a sort of theoretical environment rather than a real one. So they haven't done them for a number of years, so they'd be updating that. Similarly with IT. IT have done them, but they haven't done them in the last 18 months, so they got two of these exercises planned, I think, in July and August this year, around IT service continuity. The other high priorities identified in the year, which I think have reported throughout the year, there was a couple at Aberystwyth School with a limited opinion and one on electric car charging points. But overall, the number of high priorities high priority recommendations are quite low and thankfully being addressed. Paragraph 4.5 just outlines where we have a follow-up audit opinions, and I think the appendix demonstrates that the majority of them are on a positive pathway, whether they're going to substantial to full or moderate to substantial, and that's again is improving the overall controls within our systems. IT audits, we carry about a dozen IT audits of the SRS throughout the year. That's another positive improvement in terms of the audits carried out. We write a separate report to the SRS Finance and Governance Board, which I think was presented a few weeks ago. Again, the high priority I've already mentioned was around the business continuity exercises, but other than that, no real concerns arising within the SRS audits. And just a bit of detail around coverage. Paragraph 4.20, we obviously primarily do financial-based audits, but we do some non-financial based audits as well, things like document management, business continuity, safeguarding, asbestos management, executive decision making, etc. So it's not just about financial systems, it's about financial and non-financial systems. Paragraph 5 touches on fraud strategy. Very few frauds carried out in the year, limited number of small value ones. On that one, we reviewed in the year by Audit Wales in terms of our counter-fraud strategy, which I think I brought to the last audit committee, or maybe the one before. Quite a positive report. They were happy with our procedures, and as I've outlined before, our procedures is to test the systems regularly, every year for core financial systems and probably every 3 years for the other non-financial systems. The approach seems to work. My approach is the more we improve the systems, the more we reduce the chance of fraud and error happening. Don't get me wrong, I wouldn't stand here and say there's no fraud happening, because very often it's undetected, but I like to think the opportunities are reduced because the controls in place in the systems are. are of a very good standard. The only thing, paragraph 7 goes into performance internal audit. Like every other section of the council, we have the dreaded PIs to monitor. Sorry, Tom. Please just report that it's a positive story. We've reached or exceeded most of the targets around completion of the plan, completion of the core plan, and the sort of project efficiency. So no issues to bring to your attention on any of those issues. So the summary is, I think the system is sound with scope for improvement. There's a plethora of appendices at the back in terms of summaries of the work we've done, our quality assurance progress, quality assurance improvement programme, it's a bit of a mouthful, and the agreed actions we're updating in relation to the previous inspection on the internal audit standards. Please to answer any questions on any of those. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. It's the fourth reassuring report we received today. Anybody got any questions with regards to this report? Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. So it was helpful, Peter, that you highlighted the Audit Wales counter-fraud one, as you mentioned here. And I think we touched on that when it came to the committee. Was it last time? I think it was. So that's positive. And I noticed that further policies on the agenda further down, so I'll comment then. And also pleasing to note, given the point that made by my colleague about GIAS referenced at 6.2 and the fact that you're reviewing that self-assessment exercise. That's positive, but also your point at 5.4, be interesting to see the report and the outcomes when you look at this work against the National Fraud Initiative exercise. So just observations really, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anybody else got any questions? Councillor Keats.
Hello, Peter. Just a quick one. How many actual cases of fraud have actually been discovered, roughly? And what sort of value of fraud do we know were committed? This year, I think we did 2 very minor frauds. One was at the school, and I can't recall the other one, but it was very small amounts. The level of fraud activity we've undertaken in recent years has been quite low. So in the last 12 months, you've identified 2 examples of fraud.
It's 2 of off my head. I can't recall the exact ones, but there was no significant ones and no major ones. We had the odd. I think one was around a procurement card, credit card.
Okay.
Misuse. And the other one probably didn't end up as a fraud, but they were minor amounts of money.
Thank you. That's good. That's good to hear.
Thank you. Anybody else got any questions or queries? No? Okay, so we'll move it on then. The recommendations are on page 162. Please state whether you're happy to abstain, if you're happy to accept them. And we'll move on. I don't think anybody wants to check them. We're all happy? Okay, so we'll accept this report. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 10, the internal audit annual quarterly update. Please, Peter, if you'd like to give us that report.
Right, agenda item 10 is just a bit of an update from the last meeting. At the last meeting, I presented the draft audit plan for the current year. At that time, I was still up consulting with directors and heads of service for areas. Pleased to report there's been no significant changes to the draft I produced in March and presented to the committee. So we're cracking on with that now and delivering on that note. So it's just for information that there's been no significant, there's any changes rather than significant changes since the report in March.
Anybody got any questions or queries with regard to that report? No, we're all happy to accept that. Oh, sorry, Councillor Williams.
Very happy to accept it. I just think it's very helpful to get this closing off. We'll say something's going to be done and it comes back to us to tell us that that's been checked. So just to give you that assurance, Peter, thank you.
Okay, so everybody else is happy to accept that report. Moving on to agenda item 11, draft annual Governance and Audit Committee report to the Council. You probably all remember last year, as a result of a review that we did of our committee, that we decided to present a report to the Council, which we did last year. So this is our second report to the Council, which Peter's helped us all put together. So we really want some input or some ideas, or if you want to change anything, now is your chance before it goes to Council. So I'm assuming everybody's read it. The report starts on page 183. Peter, if you'd like to make some comments.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, endorse the comments made by the Chair. It's good practice to produce a report. It raises the profile of the committee at Council in terms of the important work we're doing in terms of governance. The report, the format of the report is identical to the previous year. Obviously been updated from what we carried out in 24-25, but please to take any other comments or additions or amendments or suggestions that members of the committee think are relevant that we ought to put in the report before it's presented to. I think we're due to go to Council in July, I think. So there's a bit of time scale. So, you know, even after today, if you've got some suggestions, forward them on and we'll consider them. But it's just to get, I just want it to be as much as your report rather than mine and the Chair's. You know?
Yeah, this is our report. This is what, taking into account the work that we've undertaken as a committee in the last 12 months. So if you do want to put anything in there, if there's something you're missing you think is important, now is your chance to say. I did have a question. It says on the 2nd of July, and then down the bottom it's got the 22nd of July and 6-1. Which one is it?
That's my error, and I make sure I get the right date.
Okay. So I can turn up on the right date then. Thank you. Right, Mr. Rees, you've got a question, comment, an addition?
Yeah, diolch, Chair. I've got nothing that I think at this moment in time needs to be added to it, but at least we've got a little time just in case something comes into our head. What my comment is about is that you mentioned, Chair, that we did the SIPFA self-assessment of the committee, answered a number of questions, and that then led us to having the annual report. Now, I think that perhaps it would be a good opportunity at some point over the coming year that we do that self-assessment again. Forgive me if I've got this wrong, but I'm not sure whether we completed the whole of the SIPFA self-assessment form. And if we didn't, then perhaps it would be an opportunity to do that now. So it's just, I'm dropping a pebble in the pond, something to think about. I know the SIPFA don't put a time scale on how many times you assess yourselves, but I think we need to think about when we do it next. Thank you. Diolch.
I think you're quite right. I don't think we did the whole of the questionnaire. I think we just took the part that we thought was relevant to us at the time. I think, yes, it's probably a good idea to do it at some point in the future. Mr. Kelleher, you've got a comment as well?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's the same pebble, I think. Mr. Rees dropped in the pond. I think it was a useful exercise to put together the report last year, and the self-assessment gave us a moment of reflection on that. And I just wonder, the feedback we got from the full council that they thought it was a worthwhile exercise for us to submit that report to them, but I also thought it was a really good point of reflection for us to look at the work that we do. And I'm wondering whether other colleagues on the committee think we should do that self-assessment every second year or maybe 3 years. Once annually would be too much, I think, but maybe it's time we should review that exercise again.
Yes, I think you're probably right. Peter was the one who organised it all for us last time. So if you'd like to come in, Peter.
Yeah, no problem with that suggestion. We did do the part. I think we did the section on effectiveness of water committee. Yeah. And there were a couple of other modules as well. I can certainly put something in the work programme. We do something towards the tail end of this year. Either revisit the bit we did, or certainly not revisit the bit we did, but do the bits we didn't do. And well, for sort of sorting and organising that, to be honest, no problem.
Okay, that would be great then. So we'll take that on forward with us. And if you have got any questions or queries now with regards to this report before it goes to council, you can let me know. Sorry, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I'll bow to Tom on this one. I think my only comment was that, given some of the discussion we've had about how some of the external audits are being picked up and scrutinised within the council, I just wondered if some comment to that effect might be appropriate under the external audit effectiveness. You know, it's simply if you think there's a form of words and if you think it's worth noting, not a recommendation, just an observation. I think we've got a chance to just be a little bit more thorough, that's all.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we'll accept this report as it goes to council with any additions that you might want to send to Peter in the nearest future. Don't leave it too late. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 12, the draft anti-fraud strategy. Again, Peter Williams, please can you present this report?
Right, thank you, Chair. Apologies in advance. These are pretty dry. If you suffer from insomnia, I suggest you keep a copy by the side of the bed. 3 bits to this: anti-fraud strategy, money laundering policy and local code of corporate governance. Obviously, the anti-fraud strategy, as we touched on, we were reviewed by Audit Wales recently. They did recommend the audit strategy was a bit out of date and needed to be updated, which we fully took on board. So the updated version is now attached as Appendix A. Not significant changes, but there are some changes to it. The key thing is, you know, we act on it, and, you know, following the agreement of new policy, we'll put some communications out and to people so it raises the profile a bit. People, I can assure you, people know where to come if they got a fraud, but, you know, new members of staff, etc., might need a bit of a refresh on that. So that anti-fraud strategy has been updated and made more current. The second element to it is the money laundering policy. It's a bit of an odd one, this money laundering policy. It's actually called the anti-money laundering policy because we don't want it to happen. We don't want to encourage money laundering to happen. It's how we prevent the authority being used as a body for people to launder money through us. We've had this policy in place for, I think it's close on 15 years. Nothing's ever come up, never had a referral that's come across my desk to look at. I think it's key to say that it doesn't fully apply to local authorities, the money laundering legislation, but SIPA, the Public Finance Institute, recommend that we have such a policy act in the spirit of the legislation. So that's what most local, in fact, all local authorities do. So it's been updated, particularly the references around some of the legislation that's changed around sort of counter-terrorism, etc. Like I said, we're an extremely low-risk authority. The only areas of sort of what is deemed as regulated activity that could affect the council is where we provide external services, and we provide very little of those. So I might provide audit services, or Rob might provide accountancy service to outside bodies, but where that occurs, there's a financial transaction and that money is paid. It's not a cash transaction. I think these money laundering are aimed at the private sector business who may be cash transactions, and, you know, there may be payments going through that need to be sort of flagged or alert to the relevant agency. But we've extremely low risk, but we've got a policy. There's an action plan in place if people suspect it. The other bit that probably might affect us is about taking cash payments. I know local authorities have reduced the amount of money they will now accept as cash. Some as low as £1,500. Ours is set at the limit that was recommended back, and the thing is, I guess, €15,000, which is about 12,500 sterling. We have very few cash payments relating to that amount of money. In fact, nothing, I don't think, in the last 2 or 3 years. So, but even if they come and pay that, we've got a process in place about sort of identity, so we identify who the person is who's bringing it, and that procedure will work in those cases if they do present that level of cash. But like I said, it doesn't happen. Most payments are paid either by cheque or low value cash or bank transfer and direct debit. So we are a low risk authority in terms of money laundering policy, but we've got a policy in place to deal with any issues that arise. The third policy or statement is what we call a local code of governance, local code of corporate governance. This is a framework document produced by an organisation called Solace, which is the Society of Local Authority Chief Executives. They produce it in conjunction with SIPFA, the Public Finance Institute, and is like a sort of a benchmark to assess itself against in a best practice area. There are about 8 different standards within it about behaving with integrity, determining interventions, developing capacity, etc. So we've gone through that document because I think we produced an annual governance statement which is closely linked to this, but I think we sort of fell into the trap of updating the annual governance statement instead of the local code. So we've now split that out, and the local code is now accurate to where we are, and the annual governance will reflect where we are. The annual governance statement has always reflected where we are, but the code is now caught up, to be honest with you. Like I said, it's a bit of a dry topic. We've been through it, it's updated. It now outlines our governance process across it, our governance processes across all those different 8 headings. And I'd like to thank Tom because he helped me quite a bit on this in terms of updating it. So it wasn't down to audit as well. So that's the local code. It outlines, like I said, the themes of the document. And it's a bit of a Bible in terms of our governance procedures. And those are the 3 bits. Pleased to try and answer any questions you may have on it.
Thank you, Peter. Has anybody got any questions? Councillor Jones, your hand is raised.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the cash handling issue. From an equality perspective, I do think it's important, particularly for low-level cash transactions, that we keep that facility open. There are sectors of the community, and I don't want to pick on older people, but not everyone is very good at mobile phones, internet banking, etc. So it's just a point that I want to emphasise. It is important, particularly for low-level transactions. I'm thinking of people that pay their council tax by small amount, monthly amounts of cash, that facility is available. And I know that we're not suggesting it isn't, but I just want to emphasise that. Thank you.
Yeah, fully take that on board. Yeah, that facility is still there. When we were drafting the policy, I had a conversation with Andrew, and there are people in the community who actually budget by cash these days, given the cost of living crisis. So we didn't want to take that facility away either, because the old chair said, if you haven't got cash, you can't pay it. Whereas if you're using other means, you can. So it was helping people in the community as well. So that's why we decided to keep that cash level at the higher limit and didn't drop it similar to other authorities.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Peter. It was really just a suggestion that it's obviously, well, I think it would be quite helpful if they could just simply highlight where there have been changes so that we understand which part of a policy has been amended, because obviously I'm afraid I don't have the familiarity with the previous one. So it's just a steer for us as members, so we know what's changed and what's coming, which may be external legislation, as you pointed out. Just a suggestion, please, because it makes it easier for review. Thank you.
Fair comment. Anybody else got any questions?
Well, it's not a question. It's to pick up on Councillor Jones's comment and Peter's comment. We're committed to having the facility to people pay their council tax and business rates in cash, and we're making sure that's available for people. It is an important service we offer, and as we said, if you're on a tight budget, the advice is if you go to cash, it is you can control your money very easily, and it's tough, but that's the way to do it. So we will continue to have that facility for people to pay cash if that's what they choose to do.
Thank you, that's reassuring to know. Anybody else with any comments about these reports? No? If we're all happy then, the recommendations are on page 193, that we all accept them. Everybody happy? Yeah. Okay, moving on to agenda item 13, which is the Audit Committee Work Programme, which is on page 251, which Peter's put together with regard to what we've got ahead of us in the next 12 months.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's just a sort of standard skeleton approach, which I'll update after each meeting. I think you want to come in on, Rob wants to come in on an item of a suggestion as an addition to it.
Okay, this is your chance, Rob.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just to draw your attention, you'll see on the work programme that we have that column that says references a special committee date to deal with the statement of accounts. That's always the case, because just by quirk, the audit timescales and the statutory deadline that they have to work to doesn't fit with our sort of quarterly schedule. But the reason I'm commenting now is because, in addition to that uncertainty, we're also exploring the opportunity, or well, the option, sorry, of the approval of the statement of accounts being delegated from Council to this committee. So at the moment, the accounts come to the committee for review and endorsement, if you like, to Council, and then full Council approve the accounts. There's a mixed picture across local authorities in Wales. So, some take it to full Council, some take it to Governance and Audit Committee. We are permitted to only take it as far as Governance and Audit Committee. And so the reason for looking at that is mainly because of the audit timescales. You'll recall last year that we were very, very tight to the wire. And the fact that it has to come here and then Council adds another fortnight into the process. And that was hard enough last year. This year, the audit timescales have been brought forward a month, and next year they're coming forward a month again. So with that in mind, you know, and we can do only as much as we can do as officers to try and streamline that process. Obviously, it's very much with the auditors in the main, but by switching where the accounts get approved, it helps with that timetabling. It needs to go through Council. It's ultimately Council's decision. So the intention is that the report will go to Council on, I think it's the 22nd of July. For them to ultimately make that decision. But it's giving you awareness of that as committee members, of the fact that should Council agree to that, then come October, what we'll probably be looking to do is have a late October meeting, specifically to deal with the accounts, but for this committee to approve the accounts, as opposed to simply review and endorse them for Council. So I'm happy to take any questions on that, but it's more for your awareness as much as anything.
Any questions with regards to that? Mr. Rees, your hand's raised.
Yeah, thank you. Just so I've got it clear in my head. So the full set of accounts still comes to us as governance and audit for our approval, endorsement, whatever you want to call it. But are you saying that we are then going to have the final say, that it wouldn't then go to full Council, or have I got that confused? Sorry.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. So, as I said, the current process is they come to this committee for review, for endorsement, if you like, to then go to Council. Council then ratify that, if you like. But what we're saying is actually that ratification and full approval would take place in this committee, and they wouldn't go on to full Council subsequent to that. I say it's ultimately Council's decision. Council may not want to go with that anyway. They may want the accounts to continue to come to them. But equally, if they decide to delegate it, it's within their gift to do that, and they could decide to delegate the approval as well as the review to this committee. You know, it's important to say that Council take the cue from this committee anyway, and ultimately the external audit report. They are the things that generally steer councillors whether to approve them. But yeah, that is the intention, that the accounts would come as far as this committee and no further. I said that's a common practice in probably about half of the other authorities. It tends to be a mixed picture, so it's not a unique step that this council would be taking if they did decide to go down this route.
Okay, sorry to come back. And I do understand where you're coming from with the timescales. I'm involved with another local authorities governance and audit committee, and we had a situation a little while ago where we as a governance and audit committee approved, endorsed the full council accounts, and then it went to full council the following day. So you know, I know that timescales are tight, but I have got issues about transparency about this. I know that we will go through it with a fine-tooth comb, but my personal opinion is that I still think that it should go to the full council, even if it's just a, you know, it's, you know, they don't go through it then in detail. I do feel that they still have to have the opportunity, but obviously that's up to them to decide at this meeting in July. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Williams?
Yeah, obviously as a council member, I've probably got a particular perspective, I suppose. Just a couple of observations, really. Firstly, I think when it is presented to council, and I'm sure you'll do this anyway, it would be quite helpful to give context in terms of how many authorities already do this. I would tend to agree with my colleague that I think the accounts should still come to the council, even if they are for information, not for approval, and that the approval has been delegated to the Governance and Audit Committee. I know it's a subtle difference, but it's noteworthy, and I would be... I think I won't say any more than that.
Am I right to understand at the moment this is just a proposal, it hasn't been agreed yet? So
no, it would go, sorry, yeah, it would go to the, well, the next available council meeting, which would be the 22nd of July. So, you know, it's ultimately for council to take that view. They may decide that collectively they would want the accounts to continue to come to full council, in which case the process would remain unchanged.
Okay, so at the moment we're being given a heads up. This isn't a decision that's been made. So it's just for our knowledge that it might happen. Right, thank you for that. Councillor Williams.
It was only a very small point on the report, but obviously the very first item on there is now being put to September, the appointment of chair and deputy chair. So for the plan, that's just to reflect, so we get an accurate picture of the year.
Mr. Rees, you come back to us again.
Yeah. It's just another little point of accuracy, and forgive me for nitpicking, but where it says on the top there, December the 18th, should that be 2025, not 2026?
Yes, thank you for that observation. Yeah. That can be correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Otherwise, we're shooting ahead in our TARDIS, aren't we? Yeah. And just one quick, sorry, it may sound like I've got an obsession with the global internal audit standards, but I can see that there'll be an update on December the 18th. I'm just wondering whether there's an opportunity at some point for us as all of the members of the committee to have a little bit more information about the global internal audit standards. And again, referring to my other involvement, we as a committee there have had a briefing about it, and a global internal audit standards charter or statement was approved on behalf of the whole council. So just something to think about, whether we need to have a bit more information about what's actually involved by GIAS. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rees. Peter, can you come back to that?
Yeah, I fully agree with that. When I brought the last update, I did say that I need to go through the GIAS to do that self-assessment, and as part of that, I would set up a separate session with the committee to go through it. I just haven't done it yet, so it's on the to-do list, and I need to familiarise myself with it before I can sort of cascade it down to the rest of you. But it is on the list, and I will do that before it'll certainly be done before the December meeting, so it'll be more meaningful then, because you'll have that update.
Thank you again, Peter. Great. Cheers.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so moving on from that report then, thank you. Just to summarise, if you've got anything you wanted to add to the annual report that goes to council, please we'll get it to Peter soonish. following that, then our next meeting will be held on the 25th of September 2025. Well, happy. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for attending. Thank you for all your input. And it's been quite an interesting meeting. Thank you. Bye.